Tom had been away for nearly a month. His company had sent him to another city for business meetings, and though he enjoyed traveling, he always missed the comfort of his own home. Tom lived in a large mansion at the end of a quiet street. The house stood with tall windows, a wide driveway, and a garden that his gardener cared for once a week. It was a place Tom had worked hard for, and he always felt proud when he returned after long trips. Before leaving for his business journey, Tom had been careful. He locked every door and window. He checked the garage twice and even set up motion lights in the backyard. He told his neighbors he would be away and asked them to keep an eye out if anything seemed unusual. Everything was in order when he left. The trip finished earlier than planned. Tom managed to close his last meeting in half the time he had expected. With that done, he booked an earlier flight home. The thought of surprising his staff and relaxing in his mansion made him smile during the drive from the airport. He was looking forward to peace and comfort after weeks of busy schedules. As Tom drove down his street, something felt strange right away. His house looked different. The garden lights were glowing brightly, even though the sun was still shining. He never left them on during the day. The curtains in the living room window were pulled shut, though he always left them slightly open to let light inside. His sharp eyes caught another detail too. The front porch had shoes placed near the door, shoes that he did not recognize. He parked his car in the driveway and stepped out slowly. A voice called from across the street before he even reached the steps. It was Karen, the head of the homeowners association. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Karen well. She liked to involve herself in everyone's business, and most people had learned to keep conversations with her short. Karen hurried across the street, waving her arms. Her face showed surprise and alarm. "What are you doing here?" she demanded loudly. Tom looked at her in confusion. "This is my home. I came back earlier than planned." Karen shook her head sharply. No, you cannot just walk in there. You are not supposed to be here right now. I am calling the police." Tom was shocked. "Karen, what are you talking about? This is my house. I own it. I have lived here for years." But Karen had already pulled out her phone. Tom could hear her speaking quickly into it. Words like trespassing and breaking in floated in the air. His heart began to pound. Why was she behaving this way? Why would she want to stop him from going inside his own mansion unless there was something she was hiding? Tom reached into his pocket, pulled out his own keys, and walked to the front door. Karen shouted behind him, warning that the police were on their way, but Tom ignored her. He slid the key into the lock, and the door opened easily. The moment he stepped inside, his eyes widened. The air felt different, warm, and lived in. He knew exactly how his house should smell after being closed for weeks, but this was not it. It smelled like fresh cooking, like coffee, and faintly of perfume. Tom moved carefully through the hallway. His shoes pressed into the carpet, and he noticed it had been shifted slightly out of place. His gaze swept across the living room. The sofa had a blanket tossed over it, one that was never there before. A small plate with crumbs sat on the table, as if someone had just eaten there. He felt his chest tighten. Someone had been living here. He walked toward the guest room and pushed the door open. The sight made him stop cold. Suitcases were stacked neatly against the wall, none of them his. Clothes were thrown across the bed. A pair of shoes sat on the floor. Whoever had stayed here had made themselves completely at home. Tom's mind raced. This was not a stranger sneaking in for a day. This was someone who had stayed for a long time. Behind him, Karen's voice rose again. She was still outside, calling for him to leave. But her words now made more sense. She was not protecting the neighborhood. She was protecting herself. Tom's thoughts fit together quickly. The drawn curtains, the lights, the food, the suitcases. Karen had been living in his mansion while he was gone. The sound of sirens grew closer, echoing down the street. Tom stood in the hallway, his jaw firm. In a few minutes, the police would arrive. He knew that Karen would try to paint him as the intruder. He also knew that he had proof. His key, his documents, and his identity all showed the truth. But what shocked him most was not the police coming. It was realizing that Karen, who always complained about rules and order, had secretly been enjoying his home like it was her own. The sound of car doors slamming outside brought him back to the moment. The police had arrived. Tom took a deep breath and prepared himself for what was about to unfold. The police cars stopped in front of the mansion. Red and blue lights flashed across the quiet street. 2 officers stepped out and walked toward the gate. Karen hurried to meet them, pointing her finger at Tom, who stood inside the doorway. "There he is," Karen said quickly. "He broke in. He is not supposed to be here. I caught him entering this house without permission." Tom stepped forward calmly. He held his key in his hand so they could see it. "Officers, this is my house. My name is Tom. I live here. I returned from a trip today. I can show you proof." The taller officer raised his hand, signaling both sides to calm down. "We will sort this out. Let us hear both sides. Sir, please step outside for a moment." Tom walked out slowly, keeping his posture steady. He did not want to appear angry or defensive. The second officer asked him, "Do you have any identification with your current address on it?" "Yes," Tom replied. He pulled out his wallet and handed them his driver's license. His address matched the mansion. "I also have house documents inside. I can show them to you." The officers studied the license carefully. The taller one nodded. "The address matches. That is strong proof." Karen interrupted loudly. "No, no, do not believe him. He left for weeks. The house was not being taken care of. The HOA had to step in. He abandoned it. We had to use it for security." Tom looked at her in disbelief. "That is not true. I told the neighbors I would be gone. I paid my gardener. I locked everything myself. And now I find suitcases inside. Karen, you have been living in my house while I was away." The officers exchanged looks. One of them asked, "Suitcases?" "Yes," Tom said firmly. "I can show you. Please come inside." The taller officer turned to Karen. "Ma'am, if what he says is true, this will be serious. Did you enter his house while he was gone?" Karen crossed her arms, her face turning red. "I only looked after it. It would have been unsafe to leave it empty. Anyone could have broken in." Tom shook his head. "You were not protecting it. You were using it. You cooked, you slept, you lived inside it." The officers stepped into the mansion with Tom leading the way. Karen followed, speaking quickly, trying to justify herself. "I did it for the neighborhood. Empty houses bring danger. I was making sure everything was fine." But when they entered the guest room, the truth became clear. The officers saw the open suitcases, the clothes on the bed, and personal items scattered around. The shorter officer turned to Karen. "These are not his belongings. These are yours, aren't they?" Karen hesitated. "Well, yes, but it was temporary. I was just making sure nothing bad happened here." Tom kept his voice calm. "For 2 weeks you were here while I was away. This is not your property. You had no right to stay here." The officers stepped aside to speak quietly for a moment. Tom waited, his hands behind his back, his heart still beating fast. He knew the law would be on his side, but he also knew Karen could twist her story if given the chance. After a minute, the taller officer returned. "Sir, you clearly own this house. Your identification matches. The belongings inside show that someone else has been living here without permission. That is unlawful." Karen's expression hardened. You cannot arrest me. I was doing a service. We are not arresting you right now, the officer replied. But you must collect your things and leave immediately. We will file a report. Further steps will depend on what the property owner wants. Karen's mouth opened as if to argue, but the officer's firm tone stopped her. She walked to the guest room and began gathering her clothes angrily. Tom stood near the doorway, watching. He felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that the officers believed him, but frustration that his trust in his neighborhood had been broken. He had never expected someone like Karen, who often lectured others about rules, to do something like this. As Karen packed her belongings, the shorter officer asked Tom, "Would you like to press charges?" Tom hesitated. Part of him wanted to. After all, Karen had lived in his house, used his things, and lied about him. But another part of him wondered if that would cause a long, stressful fight. He stayed silent for a moment, thinking carefully. Karen finished packing and dragged her suitcases out of the room. She muttered under her breath, her eyes avoiding Tom's. She pushed past the officers and left the house. The taller officer handed Tom a card. "If you decide to take legal action, call us. We have filed an incident report. For now, the house is yours again." Tom nodded. "Thank you, officers." The police cars soon drove away. The flashing lights faded into the distance. Tom closed the front door and leaned against it. The mansion was quiet again, but it no longer felt the same. His safe place had been invaded. He walked slowly through each room, checking the kitchen, the living room, the study. Everywhere he looked, small signs of Karen's stay appeared. Dishes in the sink, a book on the table, pillows on the couch. It was unsettling. Finally, Tom sat on the sofa, staring at the wall. He knew the situation was not finished. Karen would not let it end so easily. She had too much pride, too much influence in the neighborhood. Tom's early return had uncovered her secret. But deep inside, he felt this was only the beginning of a larger conflict. The night after the police left, Tom tried to rest, but sleep did not come easily. His bed felt different, as if the peace of his home had been disturbed. Every corner of the mansion reminded him that someone else had lived there. He checked every lock again before lying down, but the thought of Karen's suitcases in his guest room kept circling in his mind. By morning, he decided to clear his head. He brewed coffee, opened the curtains wide, and stepped outside to his garden. The air was fresh, but something else caught his attention. Neighbors stood in small groups, whispering while looking toward his mansion. As Tom walked to the mailbox, two people avoided eye contact, and another gave him a quick nod before turning away. Tom realized the news had already spread. Karen must have spoken to them after the incident. Sure enough, within an hour, Karen arrived. She stood at the edge of his driveway, holding a clipboard in her hand. Her posture was stiff, and her voice was loud enough for nearby neighbors to hear. "Tom," she said, "the HOA has serious concerns about you returning early. Your actions yesterday caused confusion. You called the police on me when I was only protecting the neighborhood." Tom set his cup down on the porch railing. "I did not call the police, Karen." "You did. And you were not protecting the neighborhood. You were living in my house without permission." Karen tightened her grip on the clipboard. "That is one way to see it, but many of us feel I was acting in the best interest of the community. An empty mansion is a risk. I kept it safe." Tom's voice stayed calm. "You kept it for yourself, not for the community." The officers saw the truth. Karen's eyes narrowed. "You might have convinced them yesterday, but the HOA still has a say. We can issue fines for behavior that harms our image. You cannot just accuse your neighbors of things without proof." Tom almost laughed at the twist of her words. Proof was exactly what he had, yet Karen spoke as if she were the victim. Before he could reply, two neighbors walked closer. Mr. Lee, an older man from across the street, cleared his throat. I saw lights on at night when Tom was gone. I thought it was strange, but I never asked. Now it makes sense. Karen, you were staying there, weren't you? Karen's face turned red. That is not important. What matters is that I was making sure everything stayed safe. Another neighbor, Mrs. Patel, spoke softly. But Karen, if you were really protecting it, why did you bring your own suitcases? The small crowd murmured. Some nodded, others looked uneasy. Tom stayed quiet, letting their questions speak for him. Karen lifted her chin. This is being twisted. The HOA will discuss this properly. Until then, Tom, you should be careful. You do not want to make enemies here. With that, she turned and walked away, her shoes clicking on the pavement. The neighbors slowly dispersed, leaving Tom alone again. Later that day, Tom sat in his study, thinking. He knew Karen was not finished. She was a person who thrived on control. Being caught in his house would not stop her. Instead, she would try to turn the situation in her favor, using her position in the HOA. Sure enough, by evening, a letter appeared in his mailbox. It was an official-looking envelope with the HOA seal. Tom opened it and read the notice. The letter accused him of improper conduct toward a member of the HOA and warned him of possible fines if he continued to disrupt community harmony. Tom placed the letter on his desk, shaking his head. So this is her plan, he muttered. She wanted to flip the story, making him look like the problem. The next day, Tom visited the police station. He asked for a copy of the incident report from the night before. The officer at the desk handed him the paperwork. It clearly stated that Karen had been found with personal belongings in his house without permission. This was the evidence he needed. When Tom returned home, he saw Karen once again speaking with neighbors near the park. She laughed loudly, gesturing toward his mansion. Tom held the report in his hand, but he did not approach. Not yet. He decided to wait for the right moment, when the HOA meeting took place. That evening, Tom sat in the living room, going over his thoughts. His mansion was quiet, but the weight of conflict filled the air. He wondered if some neighbors believed Karen's story. He knew he could clear his name, but he also knew Karen's influence was strong. As he walked upstairs, he paused at the guest room door. The room was empty now, but the memory of Karen's belongings still lingered. He promised himself he would not let this happen again. His house was his safe place, and he would defend it, no matter what tricks Karen tried. For now, he locked the report in his desk drawer and prepared for what was to come. The battle with Karen had only begun, and the next round would be fought in front of the entire HOA. The day of the Homeowners Association meeting arrived quickly. The community center at the edge of the neighborhood was full of people. Chairs lined the walls, and a long table sat at the front where the HOA board usually gathered. Karen stood at the head of the room with her clipboard, already speaking with neighbors as they settled in. Tom entered quietly, holding a folder under his arm. Inside it was the police incident report, his identification, and copies of his house documents. He did not plan to argue loudly. Instead, he wanted the truth to speak for itself. As he took a seat, Karen's eyes locked on him. Her smile looked polite, but her sharp gaze showed annoyance. She tapped her clipboard and raised her voice. Everyone, thank you for coming. We have an important matter today regarding community trust and responsibility. The room grew quiet. Neighbors turned their attention to her. Karen continued, as you all know, there was an incident at Tom's house when he returned early. There was confusion, and police were called. This situation has caused discomfort in our neighborhood, and we must decide how to handle it fairly. A murmur spread across the room. Some people nodded, while others glanced at Tom. Karen pressed on. It is important to remember that the HOA's role is to maintain harmony and safety. I stepped in to protect the property when it was left empty for weeks. My actions may have been misunderstood, but my intention was only to keep our street secure. Tom listened quietly. He knew this was her way of twisting the truth. Karen then added, however, Tom accused me unfairly and caused police involvement. This reflects badly on our community. I believe we need to set clear rules so such situations do not happen again. Perhaps fines or new guidelines are needed. She looked around the room, searching for agreement. A few people nodded, but others frowned. Tom stood slowly, holding his folder. "May I speak?" he asked calmly. The board member at the table, Mr. Howard, nodded. "Yes, Tom, you may." Tom walked to the front. He looked at the neighbors, many of whom he had known for years. "I want to explain what really happened," he began. "When I returned from my trip, I found lights on in my house, curtains closed, and items out of place. I used my own key to enter. Inside, I discovered suitcases and personal belongings that were not mine." The room stirred with whispers. Tom continued, "I was confused, but I soon realized someone had been living in my home. When Karen saw me, she called the police, claiming I was trespassing. But when the officers arrived, they confirmed the house belongs to me. They also saw the belongings in my guest room. They asked Karen to remove them and leave." "That is the truth." Karen quickly interrupted. "That is not how it happened. I was making sure the house was safe. Those belongings were only temporary." "You are exaggerating." Tom did not raise his voice. He opened his folder and held up the police report. "This is the official incident report from the police. It states clearly that I am the homeowner and that personal belongings were found which did not belong to me. This is proof, not exaggeration." Mr. Howard reached for the paper. He read it carefully and then passed it to the other board members. The room grew quiet as everyone waited. Mr. Lee, the older neighbor, spoke up. "I saw lights on when Tom was gone. I suspected someone was inside. Now I know it was true." "Karen, you should not have done that." Mrs. Patel added, "I agree. Protecting the house is one thing, but living inside it is another. That crosses the line." Karen's face grew red, and she gripped her clipboard tightly. "I did not harm anything. I only stayed because it was convenient and safe for all of us." But another voice rose from the back. "Convenient for you, maybe," said Mr. Jordan, a younger neighbor. "Not for Tom. We all know the difference between watching a house and moving into it." More neighbors nodded. The support began to shift. Karen's shoulders stiffened as she realized the crowd was no longer fully on her side. Mr. Howard cleared his throat. "It seems the matter is clearer now. Tom has provided evidence. Karen, while you may have believed you were helping, your actions were inappropriate. The HOA cannot fine Tom for this situation. Instead, we will issue a warning against using another resident's home without permission." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. She looked around the room, searching for allies, but most people avoided her eyes. Tom spoke again, his tone steady. "I am not here to cause division. I only want to protect my home. I worked hard for it, and it is my safe place. I hope we can move forward without more conflict." The meeting ended shortly after. People gathered their things, some approaching Tom to shake his hand or quietly offer support. Karen remained by the front table, her face tight with frustration. As Tom walked out of the center, he felt lighter. The truth had been spoken, and most of the neighbors understood. Yet he knew Karen's pride would not let her accept defeat easily. She was the kind of person who held grudges. Back at the mansion, Tom placed the police report safely in his drawer again. He looked out the window at the quiet street. For the moment, things seemed calmer. but deep inside, he sensed Karen would try again. The conflict was not over. It had only changed shape. For a few days after the HOA meeting, the neighborhood grew quiet. Tom spent his time cleaning his mansion, making sure every corner felt like his own again. He replaced the blankets in the living room, washed all the dishes left behind, and aired out the rooms to remove any sign of Karen's stay. Slowly, the house began to feel like home once more. But Tom knew Karen too well. She was not someone who gave up easily. Even though she had lost at the HOA meeting, her pride would not let her accept defeat. On the third morning, Tom noticed Karen walking past his mansion, speaking with neighbors again. She carried her clipboard, writing things down as she talked. Every so often, she pointed toward his house. The neighbors she spoke with looked uneasy, nodding occasionally, but none seemed as supportive as before. Still, Tom felt the tension building again. That afternoon, Tom's doorbell rang. It was Mr. Lee, the elderly neighbor. He looked concerned. "Tom, I thought you should know something," he said quietly. "Karen is telling people that your mansion is unsafe. She claims you left it in poor condition, and she says the HOA may have to inspect it." Tom frowned. "Inspect it for what reason?" Mr. Lee shook his head. "She says she saw things inside that break the HOA rules. I don't believe her, but she is trying to convince others." Tom thanked him for the warning. After Mr. Lee left, Tom sat down in his study and thought. He realized Karen was changing her strategy. Since she could no longer accuse him of trespassing, she was now trying to attack his reputation as a homeowner. If she could convince the HOA that his house violated rules, she might still cause him trouble. Later that evening, Tom saw Karen outside again, this time with two other board members from the HOA. They stood at the corner of the street, talking in low voices. One of them kept glancing toward his mansion. The next morning, an envelope appeared in his mailbox. It was another notice from the HOA. This one stated that his mansion would be inspected within the week for possible violations of community standards. Tom read the letter twice. He felt a wave of frustration but also determination. He had nothing to hide. His house was well kept. The garden was trimmed, the paint was fresh, and the interior was in good shape. If Karen wanted to play this game, he would face it head on. For the next 2 days, Tom prepared. He checked the garden, polished the windows, and even fixed a loose tile in the driveway. He organized the living room, the kitchen, and the guest room. When he finished, the mansion looked better than ever. The day of the inspection arrived. 3 board members came, including Mr. Howard, who had supported Tom during the meeting. Karen walked with them, holding her clipboard as always, her eyes scanning every detail with a sharp look. "Good afternoon," Tom said politely when he opened the door. "Please come in." They stepped inside, and Karen immediately began pointing at things. "Look at that lamp, it is too close to the window. And those curtains, they are not the right style for community standards." Mr. Howard frowned. "Karen, let us focus on real violations, not personal opinions." Tom led them through the house. The kitchen was spotless, the floors shone, and the guest room was neat. The board members made notes, but none seemed concerned. When they reached the backyard, Karen tried again. "Look, the garden lights are too bright. That could disturb neighbors." Mr. Howard measured them carefully. "They are standard lights, within the limits." As the inspection went on, it became clear that Karen was searching desperately for problems, but there were none. The other board members looked more and more annoyed with her constant complaints. Finally, after nearly an hour, Mr. Howard closed his notebook. "Tom, your mansion is in excellent condition. We found no violations. Thank you for your cooperation." Karen's face turned pale. "What about the things I mentioned?" Mr. Howard sighed. "They are not violations. They are simply preferences. The HOA cannot control someone's choice of curtains or lamp placement. The board members thanked Tom and left. Karen lingered behind, her jaw tight. "You may have passed this time," she said quietly, "but this is not over." Tom looked at her steadily. "Karen, this has to stop. My home is mine, not yours. I will protect it." Karen turned sharply and walked away, her clipboard clutched tightly against her chest. As Tom closed the door, he felt both relieved and exhausted. He had won again, but he knew Karen would keep trying. Her pride would not let her forget the humiliation of being caught. That night, Tom sat in his study, looking out at the quiet street. He thought about the neighbors who had defended him and the ones who remained silent. He realized this conflict was no longer just about his house. It was about trust and respect in the entire community. And deep inside, he knew Karen was already planning her next move. The morning after the HOA inspection, Tom felt a small sense of relief. His mansion had passed without issue, and the board members had seen through Karen's attempts to find violations. Yet, deep inside, he knew Karen's pride would not allow her to stop. She had lost in public, and people like her rarely accepted defeat quietly. Sure enough, within a few days, the tension began again. Tom noticed strange messages on his phone. Notes from neighbors reported that Karen was speaking to people in the community, spreading rumors that Tom was careless with his property and ignoring HOA rules. Some messages claimed that she suggested further inspections, while others warned that Karen might try to take legal steps against him. Tom sighed and decided he could not ignore it anymore. He would have to address her directly before the rumors grew worse. That afternoon, he saw Karen outside his mansion, pacing and writing on her clipboard. She noticed him and waved, but there was no warmth in her gesture. Tom stepped outside calmly. "Karen," he said firmly, "this needs to stop. My house is mine. I respect the HOA, and I cooperate, but you cannot keep interfering." Karen tilted her head, pretending to smile. "Tom, I am only looking out for the neighborhood. If something is unsafe, someone has to report it." Tom shook his head. "I am responsible for my property. I maintain it properly. You cannot live in it, and you cannot spread false information about it." Karen's smile disappeared. "I will not be silenced. People need to know what is happening here. You think passing one inspection solves everything? It does not. I will continue to make sure this house is safe for everyone." Tom realized that words alone would not stop her. He returned inside, thinking carefully. Karen's next move could be worse than before. She had influence in the neighborhood and could try to involve legal or official channels. He decided to prepare for any escalation. The next morning, Tom received a call from the HOA office. They informed him that Karen had formally requested another inspection of his property, claiming new concerns had been noticed. Tom explained that he had already passed inspection and that the previous report clearly showed his house was in perfect condition. The HOA secretary hesitated. "Karen has submitted it in writing. They may insist on an inspection." Tom took a deep breath. He requested that a board member who supported him, Mr. Howard, be present during any visit. "If they come, I want a fair review, and I will have evidence ready," he said. A few days later, the new inspection arrived. This time, 2 board members and Karen herself came with cameras and notes. Karen immediately began pointing out things she claimed were issues, such as small cracks in the driveway, a tree branch that slightly leaned toward the fence, and minor dust on the window sills. Tom calmly walked with them, showing each area and explaining the maintenance he had already done. "This crack is natural wear. I will repair it soon. The tree is healthy and far from causing harm. And the windows were cleaned yesterday," he explained. The board members checked carefully, nodding as they saw the truth. Karen, however, continued taking pictures, insisting that these were problems that could lead to damage. After the inspection, Mr. Howard spoke directly to Karen. "We have seen everything carefully. Tom maintains his home properly. There are no violations. Your concerns are personal opinions, not HOA issues. Please respect the property owner." Karen's face turned red, but she forced a nod. "Very well, but the neighborhood must be safe," she said stiffly. Tom closed the door behind them and exhaled. He knew this would not be the last attempt. Karen's behavior was becoming more obvious, and he realized that the community was beginning to notice her repeated complaints. Over the next week, Tom took further steps. He installed security cameras around his mansion, not only to protect his property but also to ensure clear records of who entered. He organized his neighbors subtly, talking to a few who he trusted, letting them know the facts about Karen's previous stay. He wanted the truth to be clear before any more rumors could spread. One evening, as he reviewed the security footage, Tom noticed something surprising. Karen had walked past his house several times, looking in the windows, sometimes talking to neighbors and pointing toward his mansion. It was clear she was still trying to gather attention and convince others that there was an issue. Tom realized this was more than personal pride now. Karen was attempting to manipulate the community, using her position and influence to create conflict. He knew he had to stay calm and careful. Any rash action could give her more reason to claim he was troublesome. By the end of the week, Tom felt ready. He had all the evidence: police reports, HOA inspection results, photographs of his properly maintained property, and even witness statements from supportive neighbors. He decided that the next step would be to request a formal HOA meeting, where the community could see the full facts and Karen could no longer hide behind rumors. Sitting in his study that night, Tom looked out at the mansion. Every room was orderly, every corner clean. He had defended his home through patience, calmness, and preparation. The battle with Karen was not over, but he felt stronger than before. He knew the upcoming HOA meeting would be crucial. It was his chance to stop Karen from interfering permanently and to restore peace to the neighborhood. As the moonlight filled his mansion, Tom felt determined. Karen could continue to try, but now he had the evidence, the support, and the confidence to protect what was rightfully his. The quiet of the night settled over the mansion, but Tom understood that tomorrow, the next challenge would begin. The day of the formal HOA meeting arrived. Tom felt a mixture of nerves and determination as he walked into the community center. This meeting was different from the previous one. This time, he had prepared fully. He carried the police report, the HOA inspection documents, photographs of his mansion, and even statements from neighbors who had witnessed Karen's actions. Karen was already there, standing near the front with her clipboard, her expression confident but tense. She noticed Tom enter and gave a small, controlled smile. She knew he had evidence, but she also hoped to sway the community with her words. The room was crowded. Many neighbors had come to hear the discussion, curious about the ongoing conflict between Tom and Karen. Mr. Howard, the supportive board member, began the meeting. "We are here to discuss recent concerns about property conduct and HOA rules in our community. Let us hear the facts before drawing conclusions." Karen spoke first. "Neighbors, I only acted to protect the community. Tom returned early from a trip and suddenly appeared at the mansion. There were lights on, windows covered, and items inside that did not belong to him, according to me. I acted to ensure safety and prevent damage. This house cannot be ignored. It is large and requires supervision." A few people in the room nodded at her words, but many faces showed doubt. Tom stepped forward calmly. "Everyone, I would like to present the facts," he said. He held up the police report. "This report confirms that I am the rightful owner of my mansion. It also shows that Karen lived in my home without permission while I was away." The room murmured. Karen's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly tried to maintain composure. Tom continued, showing the HOA inspection results. My house was inspected twice. Both inspections concluded that there were no violations. Every part of my mansion is maintained properly. This is evidence, not opinion. He then displayed the photographs and explained, these pictures show the mansion in excellent condition. No part of it violates HOA rules. I also have witness statements from neighbors confirming my claims and supporting the fact that Karen lived here without consent. Karen opened her mouth to interrupt, but Mr. Howard held up a hand. Let Tom finish. Tom spoke directly to the room. Neighbors, this is not about personal dislike. This is about respecting someone's property. I work hard to maintain my home and follow all rules. Karen's actions created unnecessary conflict. The community deserves truth, not rumors. Karen tried to argue, saying that she was acting for safety, but the board members quickly reminded her that her intentions did not justify living in someone else's home or spreading misinformation. Several neighbors stood to speak. Mr. Lee, the older neighbor, said, I saw Karen in Tom's house while he was away. I tried to tell people, but I waited for confirmation. Now we have the evidence. Tom's home is properly maintained. Mrs. Patel added, I was hesitant at first, but the facts are clear. Karen overstepped. The HOA cannot support living in someone else's home without permission. One by one, other neighbors voiced agreement. Karen's support in the room was minimal now. Her attempts to manipulate the narrative had failed. Mr. Howard addressed the board. The evidence is clear. Tom owns and maintains his property properly. Karen acted without consent and violated the boundaries of another resident. We will issue a formal notice to Karen warning her against further interference. No fines will be imposed on Tom. This matter is closed. Karen's face turned red, and she clenched her clipboard. She opened her mouth, but no one gave her a chance to speak. The community had seen the facts, and she had no support left. Tom stepped back, feeling a deep sense of relief. The room was calm now, and the conflict had been resolved officially. The neighbors approached him quietly, offering nods of support and words of encouragement. After the meeting, Tom returned to his mansion. The streets were quiet, and the mansion finally felt safe again. He walked through every room, checking the doors and windows, feeling a sense of peace that had been missing for weeks. He placed the police report, HOA documents, and photographs safely in a drawer. The mansion was his home again, fully under his care, and Karen would no longer interfere. Later that evening, Tom sat in the living room with a cup of tea. He thought about the past weeks, the stress, the uncertainty, and the challenges he faced. He realized that patience, preparation, and calm thinking had won the day. The mansion was more than just a house, it was a symbol of his effort, responsibility, and respect for the community. From the window, he saw the last of the neighbors heading home. The street was peaceful. No one was spreading rumors, and no one was questioning his ownership. Karen had returned to her routine, and the influence she tried to exert had ended. Tom leaned back in his chair, feeling satisfied. The battle had been long, but the resolution was clear. He had protected his home without aggression, relying on truth and facts. The mansion was safe, his reputation restored, and the community respected the boundaries of ownership. For the first time in weeks, Tom felt completely at ease. His home was truly his own again, and he could finally enjoy the comfort and peace he had always worked for. The night was calm, the mansion quiet, and Tom knew that no matter what challenges came, he had the strength and patience to face them. This chapter with Karen was over, and he could now focus on living peacefully in his home.